Hello guys, welcome to my channel Lucid Fanfic, and if you're new here, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss out on our latest videos. So be sure to stick around until the end. Now let's get started. Sirens blared outside of the small apartment building, and a woman holding what looked to be a bundled-up child looked around her room desperately. She could hear the commotion outside, as well as gunshots ringing out from the police that had arrived not too long ago. She grabbed exactly what she was looking for and grinned. In her hand was a small piece of paper, someone that she knew would be able to help her in her predicament. She looked at the bundle in her arms, and a tear fell from her eye as the baby yawned cutely. "Don't worry, Isuku. You're going to be safe there." On the paper read a single word, and she spoke it aloud. "Skutu." There was a short silence before the paper began to glow a brilliant red and opened up into a fiery portal. "Who summons me?" A female voice echoed from the portal, and the woman holding the child spoke. "Master of Dimensions, please, take my child and bring them someplace where they will be safe. Please, we do not have much time left." There was a short silence before two arms stuck out of the portal, seemingly gesturing for the child. The woman hesitated, looking at the child who had a tuft of wild green hair on his head, before she gave a sad smile and gave him a small kiss on his forehead. "I love you. Goodbye, Isuku." She gingerly placed the baby into the woman's arms, and tears spilled freely from her eyes. The woman spoke before the portal closed. "Do not worry. Your child will be safe." After the portal closed, the paper disintegrated, and the woman heard a knock on the door. She spun around in fear and waited. When the door swung open, there was a man with a panicked look on his face. "Inko, where is Isuku?" The woman looked at the pile of ash on the ground. "He's safe." The man looked on the ground, and his expression grew grim. "So you found it. Good then." She looked up and embraced the man. "What do we do now?" He wrapped his arms around her as well, burying himself in her hair. "All we can do is wait." "I love you, Inko." She hugged her husband a little bit tighter and responded, "I love you too, Hisashi." As the two embraced, a voice could be heard from behind them. "I found you, you monster." The man grinned wickedly, and Hisashi spun around, protectively standing in front of Inko. The man began expelling some strange gas into the room, covering his own face with a gas mask as to not be affected. As the gas snaked into Theory room, Inko and Hisashi felt their skin and lungs begin to burn, and they painfully convulsed as the gas worked its way into their system. Hisashi looked towards his wife and grabbed her hand, giving her a reassuring nod and a loving smile, while the life drained from both of them. The man that released the gas grinned wickedly and turned around, only to have a bullet fly directly through his chest. He looked up in shock and saw a single police officer standing there, with a gas mask of his own. The man dropped to the ground, and the officer spoke into the radio on his chest. "Captain, the villain is dead. Unfortunately, it seems like we were too late. The civilians are dead, and there's no trace of the child they had anywhere." The other police officer cursed. "Well, get out of there, rookie. We'll have a team retrieve the bodies later." The radio went silent, and the new cop looked down on the scene. "I hope that kid made it at the very least." Hekapu pulled the baby through the portal and reassured the mother that the baby would be safe before shutting the portals. She looked at the child, who was seemingly fast asleep, and made a small, sad smile. This wasn't the first time that someone she owed had called her to do this, and it wouldn't be the last either. So, someone has entrusted you with their child once more. The forger jumped and quickly held the baby closer, turning to see a small blue man floating nearby. She sighed and gave the man a glare. "Glossiarch, please do refrain from sneaking up on me like that." The man simply gave an amused smile before floating over to look at the child. He gave it a quick once-over before nodding his head. "Then it is settled. I will take this child and bring him to a family on Mewni, where he will be raised." Hekapu looked at the man in shock. "Whoa, whoa, whoa. Since when do you take the kids?" Glossiarch laughed and gave Hekapu a smug look. "Well, since now." He suddenly became serious. "However, I'm serious about this. There is a dormant power in that boy, and there is a high possibility that he will become very helpful to Muni in the future." The demon-looking girl gave a small frown but knew better than to question Glossyrak's judgment when it came to things like this. She looked at the child again before giving it to the man, who held it with incredibly large hands. His name is Isuku, according to the mother, Hekapu said, shivering slightly at the sight of his enlarged hands. It was still strange that he could do that. Duly noted, he created a portal and waved Hekapu goodbye before floating through the entrance with the young Isuku in tow. Queen Moon Butterfly was sweating bullets and was obviously relieved that it was finally over. The wife that was delivering her child stood up with a grin on her face. It's a girl. Moon had already known that, but smiled nonetheless as the wife handed her the newborn baby. She had a pale gray skin, with crimson-red hearts adorning her cheeks. When she opened her eyes, they were a brilliant aquamarine, shifting from a blue tint to a green tint seemingly. She had a tuft of hair on her head that was a metallic silver and almost shone in the light. Lastly, a cute little tail folded out from behind her as she looked up curiously at her mother. Moon smiled sweetly at the child, and her husband did the same. "Would you look at that?" he said in amusement. "She has my tail after all." Moon grinned at the lizard man next to her. "So what do you think, Toffee?" He smirked and ran his finger across the baby's cheek. "I love her already." Moon giggled at his words and looked back to the child. "As do I." Toffee gave her a smile. "She'll be loved by everyone else, I'm sure." The queen nodded, and Toffee looked over to one of the knights. "Sir Friar, go gather the people and tell them that it is time to announce the birth of the new princess of Mewni, Star Butterfly." The knight hurried out, and Toffee gave his wife a loving look. "I will return shortly. You get some rest." She nodded and held the newborn a little closer. Said newborn cuddled up to her mother, making Moon grin in glee. Toffee stepped out of the room and sighed in relief that everything had gone as planned. He walked to the large balcony at the front of the castle and watched quietly as the kingdom gathered below him. Once everyone had settled down and become quiet, he began to speak. "So, I'm sure that you are all aware that my wife, Queen Moon, has been prego for some time with the next heir of Mewni?" There were some silent nods and a few looks of concern. He gave a large grin, something he didn't do often, and spoke. "Well, the child has been born with no complications. Queen Moon is currently resting with her now. Her name is Star." A knight walked forward and thrust a spear into the sky. "Hail, Princess Star Butterfly of Mewni." A resounding hail echoed from the crowd, and Toffee smiled. He saw a few people in the crowd that seemed a little bit skeptical to downright angry. He gave a small frown. It had been around 5 years since he and Moon had been wed, and even longer before since it had been announced, but he supposed that there would always be people out there that still held onto their old prejudices. He walked back into the castle, thinking to himself, "Don't worry, my princess. I won't allow them to hurt you in any way." After the king had called the Mewmans together to make his announcement, an older couple walked back to their home. "Well, a lot certainly has changed since they got married." The woman spoke to her husband, who nodded. "I agree. Now we have our first monster princess." The two chuckled, and as they opened their door, a soft whining made the two stop talking. After waiting a few seconds, they heard the noise again. The two quickly rushed to their living area and saw a child laying on their table, softly crying. As they got closer to the child, its crying began to stop as it looked up to them with soft green eyes. There was a small card attached to the child, and the man grabbed it, flipping it over to read. "Dear Mr. and Mrs. Alina, it has come to my attention that you have wanted children for many years, but have not been able to conceive. Well, this child is in need of a home, and I was hoping that you would take care of it for me. It would be greatly appreciated. Thank you." The woman looked up to her husband. "I can't believe it." She hugged her husband, and tears began to fall from her eyes. "Joshua, we're finally parents." He smiled warmly and patted his wife on the back. "The gods have blessed us greatly, Lillian." He looked at the child, and then at the front of the card. In a fancy handwriting, he saw that the card read Isuku. He inferred that it must have been the name of the child, as strange as it sounded. Isuku. He tested the name, and the baby looked up to him and cooed happily. His wife squealed a bit and cradled the baby happily. "Little Isuku, our blessing." As the two held the child, They didn't notice the dim suns on his face flash briefly. Nor did Moon and Toffee notice when their daughters' hearts glowed dimly for a second. "Isuku dear, don't forget to bring your sword, and your shield, and your lunch." A short, portly woman yelled out from her kitchen, and a young man with messy green hair peeked his head around the doorframe. "Don't worry, Mom, I've got it." He had a black vest over a white shirt and brown pants. On his side, he had a sword strapped to his belt and a round shield on his back. The woman grinned when she saw him and walked over to him, hugging him excitedly. "Look at my boy, all grown up." Isuku blushed and smiled warmly to his mother. "Not quite. I've still got to survive being a squire." His mother nodded. "Yes, of course. I just know that you can do it." Another voice echoed. "Don't smother the boy, Lillian. We don't want him being late to his first day on the job." A man walked out, a little taller than Isuku, with a salt and pepper-colored beard and head of hair. He put his hand on Izuku's shoulder and smiled at the boy. "Go on then, make your mother and father proud." The green-haired teen smiled, and tears threatened to spill from his eyes, and his father chuckled. "Although, maybe you should outgrow the crying thing." Isuku gave a laugh and wiped his eyes, adopting a determined look. Bidding his parents a farewell, he left out from their humble cottage and made his way towards Castle Butterfly, where he would be assigned to a knight and begin his training as a Knight of Mewni. As he made his way through the town, he noticed people giving him weary looks and steering away from him. He rubbed his hands subconsciously and began to quicken his pace towards the castle. He didn't lose his optimism, though, instead opting to think about what knight he'd be placed with. He looked through his small journal at his entries of different knights that he had seen in action around Muni. Different stats were listed, showing all the knights' strengths and weaknesses and what were the pros and cons to working with them. He smiled excitedly and thought to himself, "This is going to be the best day of my life." In the middle of the woods, a large muscular unicorn calmly grazed in the midst of the trees and darkness. The sun warmly shined on it, making the spot it was in very comfortable. What it didn't see, though, was the greenish-gray tail that flicked around behind a bush, its movements reminiscent of a snake. The bush rattled for a second, making the warnicorn stop grazing for a second before it dismissed the noise and went back to grazing. A few seconds passed, and with a sudden yell, something launched itself from the bushes and grabbed a hold of the warnicorn's back. It bucked violently for a second, but couldn't seem to get whatever was on its back off. Then, the warnicorn felt the thing grab its hair, and it immediately stopped bucking. Grinning, Star Butterfly wrapped her hands up in the warnicorn's hair, pulling slightly to turn the animal and giving it a few kicks in the side, making it begin to run in the direction she wanted. As the wind blew in her hair, she grinned and put her arms way in the air, letting go of the warnicorn. Hoo-hoo! She realized what she did, and apparently the warnicorn did as well, because before she could get another grip on the hair, it stopped abruptly and launched her off. She hit the ground with a thud and groaned. The warnicorn spun around and ran in the other direction. She sighed. "Drat, I wasn't done yet. What time is it?" She pulled out her compact mirror, and it showed the time. 11:42. "Oh gods, I'm almost late." She began to sprint in the direction of the castle, and as she made her way through town, greeting the people that were milling about. However, while she wasn't paying any attention to where she was going, she accidentally bumped into someone. They went down, and she tripped right over them. "Oh my goodness, I am so sorry. I wasn't paying any attention, and I was in your way, and..." The boy stopped when he noticed the bewildered look that Star was giving him. She held up a hand. I was the one who wasn't paying any attention. I'm sorry. Here, let me help you up." The boy blushed and mumbled out a quiet thank you, and grabbed a small journal that he was carrying. Once they were both up, Star quickly took off. "Sorry, I'd love to stay and chat, but I don't want to be late to get my wand." Just as fast as she came, she was gone, and Isuku was left standing in the middle of the street. He noticed her tail and frowned slightly. Was that Princess Butterfly? He was shaking. Star Butterfly, Princess of Mewni, a girl, had not only bumped into him, but apologized and helped him up. His heart clenched, and he tried to keep himself from crying, but scaring the people around him even more with a strange look on his face. A child pointed to him, confused. "Mommy, is that man right there okay?" The woman steered her child away from Isuku, knowing his reputation. "Come on, honey, don't get it close. People like him are dangerous." Isuku was too focused to hear them, however, and began his trek to the castle again, this time with a bit more of a pep in his step. Star ran into the castle throne room, panting and still slightly dirty from her adventure in the woods, much to her mother's dismay. "Star dear, you didn't forget about today, did you?" Star fidgeted with her dress. "No, I just lost track of time." Her father stood beside her mother and gave Star a small smirk. "You weren't in the woods trying to tame warnicorns again, were you?" She blushed, and Toffee knew he had hit the nail on the head. He sighed. "Come on then. The ceremony is about to begin." Star immediately perked up, putting a smile on both of her parents' faces. They made their way to the front, and nobles began to file in behind them. Once it looked like everyone that was going to be there was there, a Queen Moon turned to her daughter, who looked to be barely able to contain her excitement for getting the wand. The queen sighed a bit and put a hand on her daughter's shoulder. "Remember, Star, this isn't a toy. It's a very powerful artifact, and if you aren't careful, it could cause a lot of damage." Star nodded, and her excitement didn't drop. Moon motioned for a servant to approach them, and Moon took the wand off of the pillow it was resting on. She held it out to her daughter, who gingerly picked it up. When she grabbed it, the wand began to glow, and she rose in the air. It surrounded itself in glowing ribbons, and after a few seconds, they peeled away, revealing a simple wand that had a purple handle and circle around a star that had a red background. From the sides, two large black wings emerged and flapped slightly. Star looked at the new wand with sparkling eyes and a wide smile. The nobles began to clap, and the king and queen looked at their daughter fondly. Star gleefully hugged her parents for a few seconds and pulled away. "I'm going to go test it out." Moon suddenly adopted a worried look. Just be careful, sweetie. Why don't you get Glossaric to help you?" Star nodded, not paying much attention, and ran off in the other direction, avoiding the nobles as she sprinted away. Toffee put a comforting hand on Moon's back. "Don't worry, dear. I'm sure she's got it under control." Isuku stood at attention in a line of his fellow squires, as a knight began to list off the knights that would be taking squires. "Higgs, you'll be with Sir Stabby." A red-headed girl grinned smugly and walked over to the large man. She locked eyes with Isuku for a split second, and a look of disgust crossed her face before it went back to indifference. The green-haired teen cringed for a second, thinking of the abuse he had endured from Higgs during his time in the school for squires. He breathed out a little. Hopefully whatever knight he got, he wouldn't be interacting with Higgs too much. He was snapped out of his inner thoughts when the knight called his name. "Zelina." He snapped back to focus and waited patiently for them to say his knight. "You'll be in the Washington with Sir Lavabo." He looked over to an older man, who looked equally surprised as he was. As he made his way over, he could hear people snickering already. The Knights of the Wash weren't well respected on Mewni, and he knew that. Of course, he could relate. He wasn't exactly the most respected either. He looked down to his hands for a split second before taking his place next to Lavabo. The man rolled up the scroll and put it in his pockets. "That concludes this year's Squire selection. You all may be dismissed." All the knights gave the man a salute, and all began to scatter. Sir Lavabo turned to him and offered him his hand. Isuku returned the shake. "As you know, I am Sir Lavabo of the Knights of the Washington. It is an honor to have you as my squire." Isuku nodded. "Isuku Zelina. It is an honor to have you as my knight." Lavabo gave the boy a smile. "It has been many years since I had a squire of my own. Come now, we must have you go through the initiation before you can truly become my squire." The green-haired teen gave the man a look. "Initiation?" He nodded. "Yes, you see, unlike the other branches of knighthood, the Knights of the Wash are bound to a very tight code. In order to truly become a Knight of the Wash, you must first complete the initiation task. Have no fear, though. I fully believe you can complete the task I have laid out for you." Isuku gulped, now a little nervous for what the Knight of the Wash had in store for him. However, before he was able to voice his concerns, an explosion rang out from nearby, and rubble began to fly. He looked over to the source of the explosion and saw a huge fire raging. He heard a scream, and without thinking, he sprinted off in that direction. Lavabo tried to go after him, but wasn't fast enough to grab them. He frowned. I have to follow him. I can't be losing my Squire without truly having him. Star was panicking. Maybe she should have been more careful as to where she was aiming or what she was doing, but it didn't matter now. All she knew is that there was a huge fire in the middle of the courtyard, and it was spreading fast. She groaned as she flipped through her spell book. I haven't even had the wand for a full hour, and I've already managed to completely destroy something. Where is this water spell? As she flipped through the book, she failed to notice the stone pillar that was about to crash down on her. She heard the noise. Isuku Zelina. It's a pleasure. She grinned, and once she let go of his hand, she excitedly rubbed hers together. Now I wonder what kind of fun we can have now. I'll go call Ponyhead. She sprinted away and grabbed Isuku as she did, dragging him along. What have I gotten myself into? If only he knew. The princess. Isuku winced at the volume of his parents' combined voices. They looked at him in shock, and he blushed and sheepishly rubbed the back of his neck. Yeah, Queen Moon herself has appointed me as the princess's squire. So, I'll be staying in the castle and keeping watch over her. His mother wrapped the young teen in her arms and began to gush over him. Oh, my little boy, I'm so proud. You're assigned to the princess. He looked up to his father, and the man gave him a small smile and a thumbs up, making Isuku blush more. Thank you, but Mom, can you let me go? I can't breathe. He wheezed out. His mother quickly let him go with a gasp, and he began to cough, catching his breath. He grinned once he had composed himself and grabbed his bag. Well, I'd better get going. I don't want to keep them waiting. His parents nodded. Oh, yes, of course. On you go now, my little squire. His mother spoke as she pushed him out the door. He began to make his way away, and he could hear them calling after him. Isuku, don't forget to visit. He waved. I won't. His father yelled after him. And don't cry about it either, boy. Isuku turned around and gave his father a salute. Yes, sir. He sniffed a little and wiped the tears from his eyes inconspicuously and walked over to the carriage that was helping him carry his things to the castle. The driver looked at the 2 bags he had with a frown. Well, if that was all you had, they didn't need to send me. Isuku smiled sheepishly. Yeah, sorry about that. The driver waved his hand. Don't worry about it, kid. I get paid to do this. With that, the green-haired teen jumped into the carriage, and the 2 rode back to the castle. Isuku watched the scenery of the main castle town pass them by from inside the carriage, lost deep in thought. Not even 24 hours after he had officially become a squire, he had been assigned to guard one of the, if not the most important figure in the kingdom. Princess Star Butterfly was well known across all of Mewni. He knew that, and a very important figure of human/monster unification. Although Isuku wasn't around before the unification of humans and monsters, his parents had told him of the discrimination of the monsters from before. It shook him to his core to hear about that kind of discrimination, where he went to school with monsters and such. Of course, as he grew older, he noticed that there were still folks that didn't appreciate the monster's presence in his community, although, according to his parents, it was a lot less than it used to be. He wondered if Star had ever been the victim of unfair discrimination, or if anyone had tried to get rid of her because of her half-human, half-monster heritage. In fact, Hey kid, can you quit the mumbling? It started to freak me out. Isuku immediately blushed a bright red once he realized that he had begun mumbling. It was a trait that, unfortunately, he had never been able to shake. It gave him a lot of grief with the other squires. Once he had been shaking out his thoughts, though, he noticed that they had arrived back at the castle. He hopped out of the carriage, grabbed his things, and bid the carriage driver goodbye. As he made his way towards the castle, he heard someone calling out to him. Hey, Isuku. He turned around and saw that the princess was walking towards him. Oh, princess. Hello. She looked at his bags and raised an eyebrow. Is that all? The green-haired squire grinned and blushed. Yeah. Some clothes and personal belongings. I do have a question, though. Where am I staying? She clapped her hands together and smiled widely. Yeah. Here, let me show you to your room. She grabbed his hand, similar to how she had before, and intoxicated him around the castle, down the winding corridors, and up several flights of stairs. They stopped, and Isuku took a second to regain his bearings. She grinned at him, and he noticed the door to her room was the one he was standing in front of, and that there was another door directly across the hall from it. She opened the door to reveal a relatively normal room, just a bed, a nightstand, and a window with deep green curtains. Izuku looked at the room in awe and set his things down on his bed. "So, what do you think?" Star stood behind him with a grin. The boy turned to her and returned with his own smile. "It's awesome. Certainly a lot bigger than I expected." She jumped in the air. "Heck yeah. Oh, Izuku, come on. We have to celebrate." She grabbed him once more, Izuku barely managing to respond. "Celebrate?" Star bust the door to her room open and yelled, "Mirror, call Pony." The mirror rang for a second before the call was picked up. On the other end, a floating unicorn had appeared. "Hey, Bee-Fly. What's up, girl?" Star grinned, her tail swinging in excitement. "Ponyhead, hey. Look, they assigned me a Squire. His name is Izuku Zelina." Izuku gave a meek wave to the pony from behind Star. Ponyhead gave him a skeptical look. "That's really cool, Bee-Fly. You can order him around like a servant. Oh, we can get him to bring us snacks and stuff while we chill and watch TV or something, I don't know." Star frowned for a minute. "That's not really the point, Ponyhead. What I was calling you about is I think we should all go to the bounce lounge and hang out. We can all be friends and stuff." Izuku noticed Ponyhead scrunch her nose up for a second before getting a look of insincere excitement. "Oh, totally for sure, Star. That is exactly what we will do." Her reluctance seemed to fall on deaf ears as Star cheered joyously, grabbing Izuku by his hands and spinning him around. "Whoa." She let go, and he stumbled and trying to regain his balance. Ponyhead nodded. "Yes, of course. I will be right over there to get you too." The call ended, and Star turned to the green-haired Squire, grinning excitedly. "Isn't that great, Izuku?" He nodded. "Yeah, it is. What's the bounce lounge exactly?" Star gasped in surprise and got really close to Izuku, making him shrink away nervously. "You don't know what the bounce lounge is?" Izuku blushed. I don't get out much," he responded in a quiet voice. The half-Septarian swung her arm around the nervous boy's shoulders and waved her arm in front of him. "Well, that's all about to change. Tonight we party." Izuku gulped. He really wasn't one for parties, but he had to be there to make sure Star didn't get hurt or something. Yeah, that sounds great." He smiled nervously and noticed that a portal was being ripped open in the room. Ponyhead emerged shortly after, holding a pair of scissors in her mouth. Star grinned and hugged the floating head. Ponyhead returned the excitement. "Hey, girl." The embrace was ended, and Star gestured over to the anxious Squire. "Ponyhead, officially meet Izuku Zelina, my Squire." "Izuku, meet Flying Princess Ponyhead." Izuku bowed slightly, hearing the title of royalty. "It's a pleasure, Princess." The floating head nodded dismissively. "Yeah, nice to meet you, and whatever, Bee-Fly, you ready to go?" Star grinned. "Oh yeah, let's go." She grabbed Izuku again. He was going to have to get some wrist protectors or something if he was going to get yanked around this much in the future, and they jumped into a new portal. Izuku immediately winced at the volume level and looked around. He noticed several people dancing and some sitting at a bar ordering drinks. There were colorfully flashing knights and a DJ sitting at a front, expertly mixing the music. "Oh," he thought to himself, "it's one of those clubs." Star grinned at him. "Izuku Zelina, welcome to the one and only bounce lounge. Come on, follow me." She began to show him around, starting with the bar non-alcoholic drinks apparently, the photo booth where they took a few pictures, and finally, the dance floor. Izuku gazed wearily over the side of the floor, into the pit of spikes before. That doesn't seem very safe at all." Star waved her hand. "Don't worry, no one ever falls down there." "Whoa-ho." Izuku looked over, seeing a skeleton man descend directly into the pit. He gulped when he never heard the bones hit the bottom. Star seemingly didn't notice, and she brought Izuku to the middle of the dance floor and began to dance. Izuku looked around nervously before Star grabbed him by his arms and moved him to the music. Come on, Zelina, don't tell me you've never danced before. He blushed and shook his head. No, I've danced, just never in front of anyone. Star grinned and spun him around. Well, then maybe you should start. She took lead, and the two of them cut into the dance floor. Izuku's eyes shined with amazement as Star led their dance. It felt amazing to dance like this. No doubt because Star was an amazing dancer in the first place. Izuku smiled and began to get into the dance as well. Focusing on the music, he began to match Star's movement. Star looked up in surprise when the control of the dance suddenly slipped away, and Izuku was leading the footwork. She grinned at the boy, whose eyes were shut, a serene smile gracing his lips. They continued this way for a minute or two, shifting the control of the dance, before the music finally let out. They separated, and immediately the lounge was filled with applause. Izuku blushed heavily, shrinking behind the more outgoing Star, who grinned and waved. Ponyhead sat at the bar and drank a smoothie while trying to get some random sap's number, when she overheard the clapping and murmuring from the crowd on the dance floor. Someone must have done a great dance. It's a shame she didn't see. Then, she overheard one of the dancers talking to someone. Man, Star's always a great dancer, but who's the new guy? Her boyfriend or something? Whatever he is, he's almost as great as Star. They make a great pair. I'm glad she brought him instead of that pony chick. She's a headache, that's for sure. Ponyhead immediately stopped sipping her drink, turning around and glaring at the dancers. Then she looked over to Star and her new little friend and finished her drink before floating over to them. Hey, B-Fly, that was some pretty great dancing. Star grinned. Yeah, I know. Me and Izuku are pretty great partners. Pony grit her teeth a little, smiling forcibly through her clear anger. But Star didn't notice. Yeah, partners. Hey, Star, I think some cute boy at the bar wanted to talk to you. Why don't you go say hi, and I'll keep Izuku here company. She gasped in surprise and immediately left the two. Ponyhead's smile fell, and she turned to the Squire and glared. Listen here, Squire boy. Star only has room for one bestie in her life, and I'm not letting the stable boy take my place. Izuku winced and stammered for a moment. That's not my intention at all. SHHB, don't say a word. Just do your job, and don't say a word. She gave him a glare, her horn powering up slightly. Izuku frowned and was about to say something, but Star came back. Hey guys, the guy must have left because there wasn't a single one over there. Ponyhead grinned. Dang B-Fly, he must have. Hey, I was just talking to Isuka here. Izuku, whatever. And he was saying that all that dancing tired him out, and that he's going to sit the rest of the night out, isn't that right? Ponyhead looked at him expectantly, and Star had a look of slight concern. Izuku sighed and nodded. Yeah, I'll just go. Rest in a corner dot somewhere. He began to walk to an unpopulated area of the lounge, and, as he did so, he heard Ponyhead telling him to get plenty of rest. I don't know, Ponyhead, maybe we should head in for tonight. I mean Izu. Ponyhead cut her off. Don't worry about him, Star. He'll be fine. Besides, we haven't got to do anything like we normally do anyway. Come on, let's break some hearts. Star looked over to Izuku one more time, before sighing and grinning. All right, fine. You know I can't pass up breaking people's hearts. The two started dancing, or in Ponyhead's case, violent head-butting people and knocking them all over the dance floor. Izuku watched carefully from his spot in the corner of the room, and they continued to dance like this for the better part of an hour. He actually began to feel drowsy, probably from the minimal amounts of sleep that he had gotten in the past few days. He began to nod off, and just as he was closing his eyes, and loud bang resonated through the lounge. He immediately hopped up and looked around, seeing a woman wearing what looked to be like tactical armor walk forward. Miss Star Butterfly, I'm so glad I finally found you. I believe you have something that I need? Star looked utterly confused, but her tail tapped nervously, as if she could feel the danger emitting from this strange woman. Izuku stood up and began to make his way over to Star, pushing through the crowd of people. What do you mean? She looked around nervously. The woman smiled deviously. I want the Butterfly family wand, and I'll have it by any means necessary. Star's eyes widened before she got into a combat stance. I'm sorry, but I can't let you take my wand. Ponyhead floated beside Star. "Don't worry, Star. She looks weak. I bet I can take her." Almost immediately, the woman launched forward and smacked Ponyhead out of the sky. The horse head groaned from the ground. "Ow, my beautiful face." Star looked over in surprise and was about to avoid another attack from the woman before something stopped her. She looked up in surprise, seeing a circle of green fire blocking the attack. The woman quickly jumped back from the heat, hissing as her hands smoked from hitting the wall of fire. Isuku adopted a fighting stance, his usual nervous demeanor nowhere to be seen. He glared at the woman, fire dancing at his fingertips. "If you want the wand, you'll have to go through me." The woman grinned savagely and looked up, revealing to Isuku the large pink gem where her left eye would normally be. She surged forward and pulled a knife, which Isuku blocked with his issued short sword. As he unsheathed it, he coated it in fire. The two weapons clanged loudly, and the fire from the sword surged down to her fingertips, where she dropped her sword at the sudden pain from the burns. Taking this opportunity, Isuku stabbed forward, missing the woman's leg by about an inch due to her avoiding his attack. He then quickly pulled his sword back. She grinned. "You aren't half bad, kid," she growled. "But now it's time to get serious." She launched forward Aegean. This time Isuku was barely able to block her attacks. Isuku grunted and jumped back to buy a second time. It wasn't long, and she was immediately upon him away. At this point, Isuku was barely keeping up, using his instincts to deflect her attacks. Adrenaline pumping through him, he pushed her back and brought his sword back down with a heavy arc. He cut smooth through the woman's arm, causing her to howl in pain and back away. Isuku shook out of his stupor, but continued to glare at the woman. She growled angrily. "Don't think this is all you'll hear from me. I'm just the beginning. We'll be taking that wand, no matter how long it takes." She cut a portal with her scissors and fell through, leaving the bounce lounge safe once more. Izuku sighed and turned to Star. "Princess, are you okay?" She nodded. "Yeah, I'm fine. What about Ponyhead?" They looked over and saw the floating head get up, groaning as she did so. My head, what happened?" Star grinned. "Izuku saved us from that woman." She gave him a skeptical look, but he nodded. Star grinned and showed Ponyhead a picture of Izuku cutting her arm off. The floating princess seemed impressed. "Well, there, Squire, you got some serious moves after all." Ponyhead sighed. "Well, I guess it's time to go home then." She looked over to Izuku. "Look, I still don't necessarily agree with you, but you can keep Star safe, I guess. So I can tolerate you." Izuku chuckled. At least she wasn't threatening his life anymore. He'd never been more scared of a floating head in his life. The three went back to the castle, and Ponyhead said her goodbyes and headed get it back to the Ponyhead Kingdom. Star sighed and plopped on her bed. "Well, I am exhausted. Night, Izuku. Get out of my room." Izuku immediately complied, blushing profusely as he ran to his room. Once he was there, he sighed and eased into his own bed. That was some first day on the job, if he thought so. Somewhere else. Go where that kid. The woman in tactical armor fell through her portal and pressed a button on her suit. Suddenly, it opened up, revealing just a regular tank top and some baggy sweatpants. Also, as the suit came off, her previously human features changed to match that of a lizard, her snout growing and filling with sharp teeth. She stretched. "I hate getting in that stupid suit, but Father says we must stay inconspicuous." "Did you retrieve it?" She nearly shed her skin as she jumped and turned around to face another lizard man, with a similarly placed red gem in his eye. No, Father. It seems as the princess has been assigned some kind of knight or knight in training. Don't worry, I'm going to put a team together, and we will retrieve the wand." He glared at his daughter before nodding. "Very well then, do what you must. I just want that wand. That traitor Toffee has been let off scot-free for what he did to us for far too long. So Izuku, what do you think?" Izuku stared at Star for a solid 15 seconds before responding. No offense, Princess, but I think it's sort of a bad idea." When the half-Septarian princess had ran into his room at the crack of dawn, jumping up and down to tell him her plan for the day, he had initially been curious. Of course, when she told them that said plan involved going into the forest of certain death, and practicing her magic, his curiosity immediately died. Star groaned. Come on, Zuku. It's totally a good idea. We won't cause any property damage or anything. It had only been about a week and a half since Isuku had become the personal squire to the princess, and while he felt like he was more of a hangout buddy and less an official squire, the fiery teen didn't mind. He hadn't had many friends growing up, and they didn't last long when they saw his abilities. With that in mind, he was glad that Princess Star was so nice and all. Plus, he could still easily do his job and protect her. Princess, I'm not too sure. Did a lot of dangerous stuff in that forest, and I can't let you get hurt. Star grinned and put her arm around Izuku in a friendly manner. Ah, come on, what's a little danger? Plus, I have you to keep me safe, Mr. Squire. Izuku blushed at her words and sighed. Okay, I give. Star jumped up and cheered. Yeah, the squire held up a hand. But we come back before the sun sets. It's already dangerous before, but after dark, we need to not be there. The gray-haired princess grinned. That's fair. Come on, let's go already. She grabbed his hand, her wand, and a pair of dimensional scissors. Izuku gazed at them for a second. Are those princess pony heads? Star nodded. She came back and lent them to me. Said something about not needing them for a little while. So she wanted me to watch over them for me. Izuku nodded, accepting the answer, and Star cut a portal open, and the two jumped through. As soon as they emerged from the other side, they were falling into the mouth of a giant flytrap plant. Izuku panicked and lit his hands on fire. The plant hissed and opened its mouth wide, and the two ran out, reaching a clearing where they would be safe for a moment. Star turned and grinned at Izuku. That was a great save. Izuku sighed, a little winded, from the run through the woods. Well, it was more reflexes than anything. The princess pulled out her wand. Well, I'm ready to practice some magic. Izuku, think fast. Narwhal blast. She flipped away from the squire and launched the spell towards the young squire, sending a wave of doe-eyed, horned fish in his direction. On instinct, he drew his sword, lighting it in his signature green flames as it emerged from his sheath. It made contact with the narwhals and cut through them like nothing, the heat making a hissing noise as it hit the cooler skin of the fish. They disappeared in a puff of cloud as he did, and he looked at Star with his sword in front of him before looking at her confused. What was that? Star grinned. Well, I figure we should train together. You know, iron sharpens iron and all that. Izuku grinned and nodded. That's a wonderful idea, princess. While it may not have seemed like it, but Izuku had a love for sparring and getting stronger. He may be meek personality-wise, but when it came to his skill, he was no slouch, even if he couldn't hardly get any of the other squires to spar with him. Freak! The viridescent teen was snapped from his thoughts when a huge rainbow blast came at him. Cut through this. Izuku hopped to the side, nimbly hopping past the beam and getting closer to Star. She pointed the wand at him once more and spoke. Cupcake blast. He jumped up, using the larger-than-average cupcakes as a sort of bounce board, shortening the distance between Star and him, and he deftly cut through the last cupcake before landing in front of the princess. He went to knock the wand from her hand, but she dodged and landed a solid punch into his solar plexus. The wind was momentarily knocked from him, but he managed to dodge her next attack. He looked at her in surprise. Princess, you're trained in hand-to-hand combat? Star grinned. I've been trained by some of the best knights in the kingdom in several forms of combat. Ah, none to mastery, though. Izuku nodded, continuously dodging the princess's attacks. He saw an opening and swept his foot low, making Star lose her balance before giving her a light kick to the side and making her fall to the ground. He pointed his sword to her, the light from his flames bathing her in a green tint. He noticed her wand and quickly knocked it from her hand. I win. Star grinned and slowly rose as he put his sword away. You've definitely got the moves, Zuku. He blushed at the praise and at the nickname. Thank you, princess. You've got a very impressive set of skills yourself. She grinned and sat down. Well, after that I think we should take a quick break. Here. She reached into her purse and pulled out a couple of plastic water bottles, one of which Izuku gladly accepted, also sitting down and sipping on the water slowly. The two sat in silence for a moment, before Star turned to her squire. Hey, Isuku, can you explain your power to me? Is it magic or something? Because I don't know anyone except for my mother that can use wandless magic. Isuku shook his head. Actually, from what I've researched, it's more of a physical thing rather than a magical thing. I can create fire from the palms of my hands and from my mouth and have a high heat resistance. Plus, I can control any of the fire that I've already created. However, I don't like creating it with my mouth, as the heat resistance is only on my skin, not in my mouth. Plus, if I create too much fire, it makes my hands hurt, and if I try to control too much for too long, it gives me massive headaches and can make me pass out. Star looked at him with interest. You're right, that definitely doesn't sound like magic. It isn't nearly that limited, but it's powerful too. How'd you find all this out? And does using your sword too long hurt or anything? Isuku opened his hands and looked at the callous pads. Actually the sword is a flammable metal and it never burns away. I do have to keep the sword polished and sharp, so there isn't any charcoal residue buildup. As for how I found out about the ups and downs of my power, it was experience mostly. The power didn't even actually manifest until I was about 4 years old. Everyone in town thinks I'm cursed actually. The young princess raised her eyebrow. Cursed? Isuku blushed. He hadn't meant to say that. Yeah. Star frowned. Does that mean? The greenette nodded. Yeah, I never really had any real friends before I met you, Star. No one wanted to be around me, because they thought I was a freak and that I would get them all cursed too. Isuku looked away from the princess, eyes downcast. He jolted at a sudden feeling of arms wrapping around him. He looked at the scaly princess in surprise. She had small tears forming in her eyes. Isuku, I had no idea. I'm so glad I can be your friend. You're so cool. So those guys don't know what they're talking about at all. He blushed profusely, but smiled anyway and returned the hug. Yeah, I'm really glad to. They stayed that way for a moment, before Star pulled away from the hug and wiped her eyes. Besides, I haven't really been accepted either. Other than Ponyhead, I really haven't been able to make friends that treat me as equals. I'm the princess and all, and even being half Septarian has made it hard. Monster-human relationships are better than ever, especially since my birth, but I can still tell that some of maids and servants look at me with disdain. I could just be imagining it. It's kind of made me self-conscious about my looks and stuff, but that's neither here nor there. Izuku chuckled and nodded. I definitely understand. I guess we're just a couple of misfits. Huh, Star? He immediately shut his mouth, realizing that he accidentally used her first name. He blushed profusely. I am so sorry, Princess Butterfly. Star laughed and blushed as well. Izuku, that's the first time you actually call me by my name, and you apologize immediately after? Come on, we're friends after all. Call me Star. Izuku blushed and grinned. Okay, Star. The words were foreign to his lips, especially without the title of princess coming before it, but he liked it. It was like they were officially friends now. They sat in a comfortable silence for a moment before Star arose. Well, I'm gonna go pee, and we can spar again right after. Don't do anything dirty. Izuku's entire face erupted in a blush, and he began sputtering to himself. Star laughed a hearty laugh. Whoa, that was definitely a reaction. I won't be long. I pee fast. She sprinted out to the woods, and Izuku blushed even more at her bluntness. He felt a little nervous about letting Star go off into the woods like that on her own, but the alternative was completely off of the table. He blushed at the slightest implications of following her into the woods while she relieved herself. He blushed even harder when he remembered that Star had told him not to think of anything dirty. Like he had much of a choice with her bluntness, Izuku. His inner musings were cut short when he heard Star scream for him from the woods. He immediately jumped up to his feet and ran into the woods. Under the cover of trees, very little sunlight shone through, so he lit his hand on fire and searched around. Star? Star? He waited for a response, and he heard a faint explosion, followed by his name, Aegean. Izuku. He followed the direction of the sound, and came into a clearing that had evidence of fight on the ground, but no evidence of Star anywhere. He called out to her again. Sta. Izuku, I'm right here. He spun around, and saw the princess had been behind him. He sighed, and looked at her with concern. Star, are you okay? What happened? She smiled, but there was a dangerous glint to her eyes. Well, I'm fine, but I'm afraid you won't be. She launched forward, and before Isuku could even think of drawing his sword, there was something sticking out of his neck, and he was falling onto the ground. As his vision faded, he looked up to Star and saw her body morph into someone completely different. A skinny Septarian with several gold teeth and eyes that were shaped like spirals grinned at him, and the world went dark. When Isuku awoke, he was in a cell, with Star passed out on the floor on the other side of it. He rose groggily, his head pounding, and his hands bound with a strange cloth. He scooted over closer to Star and cautiously whispered her name. Star? She turned over and groaned. Is that at you, Isuku? He nodded, and she opened her eyes, which immediately adjusted to the darkness. At the sight of the green net Squire, she sighed in relief and looked around. Where are we? Isuku shook his head. I don't know. I heard you calling for me, but I couldn't find you. I was attacked by a Septarian, possibly two. Actually, I have a question. Do you know about any Septarians that can mimic people? Star eyebrows rose in confusion. Mimic no. Dad doesn't really associate with the other side of the family, and they all kind of disown him. They don't believe that relations with Mewmans are worth it. Izuku's eyes widened at the news. There were still monsters that opposed the new laws. When he thought of it, he didn't know any Septarians other than the king and Star herself, so it made sense. Did King Toffee write all the books on Septarians that he had read through? Did he not include all of the different breeds? Or was that Septarian in particular special? Perhaps he. Hey kid, I'd keep it down if I were you. Izuku snapped from his thoughts and realized he had been mumbling to himself. He looked outside of the cell door and saw a large Septarian holding a spear. He had an agitated look on his face. You're seriously pissing me off, kid. So shut it before I skewer you. The guard continued down the hall, and Izuku looked over to Star. I think we may have a big problem on our hands. Star nodded. That same woman from the bounce lounge took my wand. I'm getting a feeling, though, that she isn't just a normal woman. The Squire frowned. They have my sword, too. My hands are bound, and he tried to ignite his hands. It seems that they can't burn through this material. Star sat down and ran a hand through her hair. What are we going to do then? We can't get out of this cell unless. Izuku, how hot can your flames get? Izuku shrugged. I'm not entirely sure. I've never pushed them to the hottest, so I didn't hurt anybody or anything. She moved over to the cell door and noticed that it had a simple latch. Izuku followed her and looked at it. I think that if heated up enough, I could kick it open. To do that, though, I'll try my best. Star looked taken aback. She hadn't even finished her sentence, but Izuku looked at her with determined eyes. I know it hurts my mouth to breath fire, but it's my fault we're in here in the first place. I shouldn't have let you go alone. So I'll heat the latch up, and you can kick it open. She shut her mouth and mirrored his look. He leaned down to the latch and looked at Star. Stand back for a second, it's going to get pretty hot. He formed his mouth like he was about to whistle, and it sounded like a match lighting before a steady stream of greenish-white flames came out of his mouth. Star had to look away due to the brightness of the light, and after a moment, Izuku gave her the signal. Okay, Star. As quickly as she could, the princess delivered a swift and solid kick to the flat part of the door. It snapped and creaked open slowly. She grinned and turned to Isuku, whose mouth was worse for wear. His lips were bubbly and blistered, and vital fluid leaked from his mouth. He was in clear pain and had tears streaming from his eyes. Star winced. Thank you, Isuku. He nodded. Nothing. He managed to gurgle out. Her stomach turned at the sight, and she quickly averted her gaze to his eyes. Let's get my wand. I know a healing spell that should fix you up. The two quietly sneaked down the dark corridor, Izuku's hands still bound, and his breathing a little ragged. They stopped when they saw two Septarians in a dimly lit room. The girl had the wand and some other stuff in her bag. All the boy carried was the sword. Put that stuff down. The boss will have you flayed if he finds out we're messing with this. Taftor was supposed to bring this trash to him, but she said she had to take that suit off first. The first one scoffed. That kid should have just brought it straight to the boss. It's not smart to keep him waiting. The second one sighed. Well, She's in a rebellious phase right now. Not good for someone in her position. The two sounded like they were getting closer, and they heard a door shut. The two Septarians came down the hall and went in the opposite direction that Isuku and Star were hiding. Once they were a decent distance away, they snuck to the room and opened up the door. Thank gods they didn't leave the door locked. Isuku could only grunt in agreement, and Star immediately grabbed her bag and her wand. She pointed the wand at Isuku and whispered, "Super healing burn salve." A green light emerged from her wand and coated Izuku's mouth inside and out. As the glow dissipated, his wounds cleared up until they were gone. Thank you. His mouth was still extremely dry, so he was given some water. That Star still had in her bag. Izuku unsheathed his sword and used its sharp edge to cut his binds. He rubbed his wrists, and Star went through her bag. She pulled out a pair of dimensional scissors and was about to cut a portal, but a voice from down the hall alerted her. "Yeah, the wand is right this way, Father." "Yes, I'm sure that nothing has happened to it." Star slowly lowered the scissors, with the intent of finding out who the supposed boss and father was, but Izuku grabbed her shoulder. "Star, we really have to go. I don't think we can fight off an entire army of Septarians." She looked towards the door for a moment, before sighing. "You're right. Let's go." She quickly cut open a portal and closed it behind them after the two exited. Back in Butterfly Castle, the two collapsed onto the floor of Star's room. Izuku looked over to Star. "We have to report this to King Toffee immediately." Star nodded. "Yeah, but I'm exhausted. Let's wait until morning." The green net seemed conflicted for a moment before nodding his head. "Yeah, it's a good idea to get some rest real quick. Good night, Star." She had already crawled over to her bed and bundled up in the covers. "Night, Zuku." Izuku traveled to his own room, thinking about the prison and the Septarian that had captured him. He had a bad feeling that something big was about to go down, something a lot bigger than humans and monsters. Somewhere else. Taftor knelt before her angry father in embarrassment. If she hadn't gone to take the suit off, they'd still have the wand. Of course, she didn't need to tell her that herself. Her father had plenty of energy to ream her out. "You foolish girl. The butterfly wand was in our grasp, but you let it slip because you were uncomfortable? I should kill you where you stand." She flinched at the words, and her father stopped in front of her. "However, I will give you one final chance, Taftor. You have been trained by the very best, and you are smarter than this. You will give me that wand, and we will exact revenge on Toffee." He picked her face up by her snout. "And if you fail me again, it would be best for you not to ever return here again, because I will end your pitiful existence." He let go of her and walked into the room behind his throne, leaving the young Septarian behind. She clenched her fist and hit the ground below her. "I swear, Father, I will kill that half-breed and her Squire, to bring your honor back." "So you two decided to wait until now to tell me that you were captured by Septarians yesterday, when you went into the forest to spar?" Izuku blushed, and Star scratched the back of her head. Her tail nervously curled around her legs. Yeah?" King Toffee pinched the bridge of his snout. "Star, this is very important information, and you could have been seriously hurt." He then turned to Isuku, a sharp look in his normally monotone expression. "And boy, I expect you to be a voice of reason, and watch out for Star. You should have reported immediately." Izuku nodded and lowered his head more. "Yes, Your Majesty." The Septarian king nodded and straightened himself. "What is it that they wanted exactly?" Star frowned. "They were after my wand. I'm not sure why, though. One of the guards mentioned name. Taftor, maybe? I can't really remember that well." The green-haired Squire pitched in. "I believe it was Taftor. They also said something about a boss, and it sounded like he isn't a pleasant ruler." Toffee frowned. "Taftor, you say? I believe I may have an idea of who their leader is." "Star, do not go back to that forest until I deem it safe again. Izuku, watch over her. I have some business to attend to." He quickly spun around and walked out of the room, leaving Izuku and Star alone. The teenage hybrid turned to her Squire. "Hey, Izuku, what do you think Dad's gonna do?" Izuku tapped his chin thoughtfully. "Well, King Toffee is known for his cunning. If I had to guess, he was going to track down the Septarians that captured us." She nodded. "That makes a lot of sense. Hey, let's go do something fun." We can't just sit here all day. Actually, Star Deer, it's time for your lesson. The two teens turned around and saw Queen Moon standing there, a slight frown on her face. Star groaned. But Mom, I already did my lesson for this week. The Queen walked forward. I'm very sorry, dear, but with what happened, we need to ramp up your studies. We can't have you being captured again, and if not for Isuku, you may not have been able to escape. The princess frowned and went to argue, but shut her mouth and sighed. Yes, Mother, I understand. Oh, can Isuku come? Moon looked over to the green-haired teen. I don't see why not. Star let out a whoop, and Isuku was dragged into the library with them. They sat down and began going over magic information with Star. As they studied, Isuku allowed his mind to wander to the events that had transpired previously. When they were captured, he distinctly remembered the Septarian that had transformed into Star and tricked him into letting his guard down. He had been that easily deceived, and he and Star could have very well ended up dead because of him. He clenched his fists. He had to get stronger if he was to protect the princess. He had been training since he was 9 in order to become a knight, and he was given one of the most important squire jobs in the entire kingdom. He didn't feel deserving, but he had the responsibility to take care of the princess, and he wasn't going to let the kingdom down. Ah, Isuku, you're so determined. He snapped from his thoughts and looked over to see Star grinning at him and Queen Moon quirking an eyebrow at him. I said all that out loud, didn't I? Star nodded. Yup. Izuku sunk in his chair, his face erupting into a blush. Star giggled. You know, Zuku, for such a cool and determined fighter, you sure do get embarrassed easily. This did nothing to help Izuku's embarrassment, and he sunk further into his chair. The queen held up her hand, silencing Star's giggles. All right, that's quite enough. Star dear, why don't we call it a day? I have some important matters to attend to with your father anyway. The princess let out a whoop and shot up from the table. Queen Moon held up a hand. Remember, Star, no going into the forest and stay close to the castle. If anything seems suspicious, report to me or your father immediately. Star nodded. Okay, Mom. Come on, Izuku. For what felt like the millionth time, Izuku was grabbed by the arm and dragged away by Star. As they ran, Izuku managed to fumble out a few words. Star, where exactly are we going? The girl paused and turned to the Viridian. Squire. I actually have no idea. Do you have anywhere specific you want to go? Izuku looked outside. Want to go train? Star quirked an eyebrow. You really like to train, don't you? The green-haired teen blushed and nodded. Oh well, I don't really have any other hobbies. Exercise makes me feel good. Plus, I haven't had the opportunity to do my routine today. I usually do it before you wake up. She shrugged. Okay, run me through your routine, and we'll do it together. It's better that way anyway. Izuku grinned. Absolutely. They made their way to the courtyard to train, Izuku going through his daily routine. As they talked, they bumped into one of the maids in the castle. Izuku let out a hasty apology. The maid waved her hand dismissively. Oh, don't worry about it. Please, it's no trouble at all. He continued to bow and apologize, and Star gave the maid a strange look. Hey, I haven't seen you around before. Are you new? The maid nodded. Yes, actually. I started just this morning. My name is Felicia. She bowed, her long pink hair waving as she did so. Star smiled. Okay then. Nice to meet you, Felicia. The maid smiled warmly. Likewise to you, Princess. The princess and the squire continued their walk, and as they did, the warm smile the maid had dropped, and she grinned savagely. She made her way into the small closet nearby and pressed a button under her hair. Her body opened up, and inside, a grinning Septarian girl sighed in relief. I seriously hate these things. They're so uncomfortable. But I guess since I'm the smallest and fastest, I have to be the covert one. She pulled out a small communication device. Father, I've successfully infiltrated Butterfly Castle. What should I do next? Kill the girl? Steal the wand? The voice on the other end came through. You already failed once at that. I don't want you trying that again. Be patient, child. You are to gather intel on the castle for me. Once I deem it ready, we'll storm the place and take what's rightfully ours. Besides, our weapon isn't ready yet. We can't get rid of that traitor without it. And remember, girl, If you don't follow my orders exactly, you'll be the first to be executed when we take over." The device shut down, and the Septarian girl put it away. "You old man. I hate the waiting game. Plus, that means the longer I have to be in this. Get up." "Well, whatever." She stepped back inside, and the suit closed back up. The blue eyes blazed green for a split second, and Felicia exited the closet. King Toffee frowned as he studied the map of Mewni and its nearby territories. "Dear, you'll give yourself a migraine studying that map so closely." He looked up and saw his wife standing before him, a concerned look on her face. "I fear the worst, my love." The queen nodded. "I know, but all we can do right at the moment is wait. We don't have near the information to know where they are. It's entirely possible that they aren't even on Muni." Toffee rolled up the map and rubbed his face. "You're right, Moon, but I can't just not look for him. He kidnapped our daughter, and I'm entirely sure that he had intentions of killing her." The blue-haired queen sat down next to her husband. "I know. I never thought that they'd come out of hiding, but it seems that they have every intention of rebelling against us." Toffee looked up, his eyes ablaze. "This is no simple rebellion we'll be facing. This will be all-out war." He looked at the rolled-up map and frowned. "And if Rastakor wants war with me, then I hope he's prepared." He stood up and presented Moon his hand, a crooked grin adorning his face. "No one threatens my family and gets away with it." Star and Isuku had just finished their workout, both of them panting. Star looked over to her Squire. "Whoa, Isuku. It's pretty impressive that you do this every day. You mind if I join you from now on?" Isuku blushed. Of course not, Star. Although, I do tend to wake up early in the morning, so I hope you don't mind." She shrugged. "Nah, I think I can handle it." The two sat down in a comfortable silence, Isuku drinking from a flask of water to refresh himself. Once again, his mind wanders to their capture. He frowns and turns to Star. "Hey, Star, how come those Septarians have a grudge against your father anyway?" The princess looked over to him, her tail wagging back and forth. I'm not entirely sure, actually. All I know is that before I was born, my father left the Septarians for my mother and married her. They didn't approve of their relationship, and since Toffee was in line to become king of Septaria, he was forbidden to be with her, so he just left. That's all I know, though. I guess I would be mad, too, if my prince left to go lead a rival nation." Isuku frowned but nodded. It definitely seemed like it was missing some piece of crucial information, some reasoning as to why they hated the king so much. Perhaps it was just pride? The Squire turned to Star. "I'm worried, Star. I feel as if there is something bigger than the royal wand at play here." The half-Septarian turned to her friend. "What do you mean?" Izuku shrugged. "I just have a bad feeling about it." Star leaned back. "Well, whatever those guys have planned, we can all handle it." The green-haired teen nodded and smiled. "Yeah, we can do it." Star hopped up and jumped around for a second with enthusiasm, and Izuku smiled. Still, though, at the back of his mind, he had a feeling that he couldn't shake, like that things would soon be very different around Muni. Rastakor was highly unimpressed. It wasn't just the incompetence of his daughter either. It was like his entire squad of guards and soldiers were incompetent. He had zoned out of the meeting several minutes ago, each of his knights spouting utter nonsense at each other, with plans and ideas that were rubbish. He sighed and slammed his hand on the table. "Now, you idiots, if I can speak." His entire guard immediately silenced themselves. "While yes, it is true that my daughter has entered Muni Castle and has raised no suspicion as of yet, we must continue to bide our time. No doubt that little princess has tattled on us about her capture, and I'm sure that Toffee has been alerted to our presence. In fact, I'm sure he knows that I'm at the helm of our operation here. Our enemy is known for his cunning and tact. We can't just storm the castle and not expect to be utterly decimated. With that traitor prince of ours at the helm of the Mewni army, no doubt he'll lead them to victory, so we have to take him out before we can take Muni for our own. In order to do that, we need Mewni magic." One of his knights spoke up. "That's why we stole the royal wand from Princess Star, right?" Rastakor nodded. "Yes, and had my daughter not failed me a second time, we'd be in a much better position than we are now. However, not all hope is lost. There are those that also wish to see the fall of the traitor king, those that have means to our end. Gentlemen," the leader of the Septarians held his hand out, and a robed figure slinked out of the shadows of the room, surprising the other occupants. Rastakor merely grinned. This is Malus Agravris, a mage that hails from the dark quarters of Mewni. He peered from under his hood, and his eyes flashed gold before he grinned. A pleasure. One of the knights narrowed his eyes. What can he do? Rastakor looked at Malus and grinned. An example, perhaps? The mage stared at the knights, and when they locked eyes, the knight's eyes widened, and Malus spoke. Stop! The knight's eyes flashed golden, before his body began to crumble away. Soon, all that was left was a pile of sand where he sat. The rest of the generals looked on in horror, and Malus came over, dusting the seat off, and sitting where the other knight had previously sat. He had a savage grin on his face, and looked over to Rastakor. I suppose that will suffice? Rastakor laughed, hearty and cold. Yes, of course. Gentlemen, Malus here is our key to victory. We will get him into our friend Toffee's inner court, in which he will murder our good friend the king, and we'll march on to Muni in the wake. The men cheered, and Malus grinned savagely. Rastakor turned to him. So, my friend, what do you think? The mage leaned back in his seat. I think we should have done this years ago. Rastakor grinned. Yes, I agree. Isuku, is it cold to you? The green-haired squire gave the princess an inquisitive look. Are you princess? I can light a fire to warm up. She shook her head. No, I've just got to chill all of a sudden. Anyway, like I was saying, Ponyhead totally freaked when I told her we had been kidnapped. She said that if she was there, she would have taken out every single guard and gotten us out of there single-handedly. And then I said, how could you do that without hands? Izuka laughed, and Star giggled. Needless to say, she didn't say anything else about the kidnapping. The fiery squire had to admit, the thought of a speechless, red-faced Ponyhead was hilarious, and probably a rare sight. Suddenly, someone walked into his back and nearly knocked him over. The sound of crashing china made him turn, and he saw the same maid girl that they had bumped into earlier on the ground, surrounded by broken china and a few stray pieces of silverware. He bent down to begin to help her pick it up and apologized. She shook her head. No, it's my fault. I got distracted and wasn't watching where I was going. Izuka laughed it off. Don't worry about it. It's fine. Now, do you need help taking that to the garbage? She shook her head, face turning red. No, I believe I've got it. Thank you, though. She quickly took off, and Izuka watched her leave. He must have had a strange look on his face, because when he turned to look at Star, she had a huge grin on her face. You like her, huh? Izuku immediately sputtered in surprise and went red. What? No. Star simply laughed and jumped around him. You like her? The green-net groaned and put his head in his hands. He felt like he might be hearing about this more than he'd like. Felicia quickly sped down the hall, in a hurry to get back to her specific quarters, so she wouldn't miss her report in time. She rounded another corner, and a pair of hands grabbed her and stopped her in her tracks. She looked forward in surprise and saw the last person she wanted to be around. King Toffee stared at her, an inquisitive look on his face. Where are you off to in a hurry? She gulped and could feel beads of sweat begin to form. I was disposing of this broken china. I had a bit of an accident. He gazed down at the broken china and looked back at her. He let go of her and looked at her directly in her eyes, making Taftor even more nervous. Are you new? She nodded quickly. Yes, sir. I just started today. My name is Felicia. He rose his brow. That's funny. I don't remember hiring any new servants recently. Oh no. At this point, Taftor was in a near full panic. The paperwork must have gotten mixed up in something and lost. Toffee gazed at her before dusting off his suit and nodding. Perhaps. Well then, I have important matters to attend to. Be seeing you. She grinned sheepishly. Oh, likewise, sir. He began to walk away, but then stopped. Oh, and Felicia. She froze and turned to him slowly. Yes? He gazed at the plate of broken china again. Do be more careful with the fine china. He spun around and was on his way. Taftor let out a breath she didn't know she had been holding. She quickly made her way to her quarters and threw away the broken china before exiting the suit. That was close. She pulled her wrist communicator to her face. Father, this is Taftor reporting in. From what I've heard from the other maids, King Toffee is onto us. He knows that you're at the helm of operations as well. The voice of Rastakor echoed from the communicator. Nothing I didn't already account for. Good then, you may live yet, daughter. Continue your posting and await further instructions. Remember, if you mess this up in any way, you will be the first to die. She nodded. Of course, father. Good then. The communicator went silent, and Taftor sighed. Maybe I should have just stayed with mother in the kingdom. Learn to clean and cook. No, I had to be the warrior spy kid. She entered back in her suit and went back to her duties as Felicia. Toffee entered his private quarters and saw his wife reading in their bed. Hello, dear, how goes it? She smiled when she saw him. I'm just getting in some evening reading, keeping the mind sharp. He nodded and went over to his desk, rummaging through the paperwork that was present. Dear, do you know of any new maids being hired recently? Moon looked up with an inquisitive look on her face and tapped her chin. None off of the top of my head. Why? Toffee continued to look at the paperwork. I ran into a new maid today not long ago. She said she just started today. I was just wondering if you had seen it or knew of any of her paperwork. The queen put down her reading glasses and set the book down. No, dear. Perhaps it was lost in transition? That would be strange, though. We've never had that happen before. The Septarian king frowned when he found nothing on a Felicia. Yes, it's very strange indeed. Isuku wiped the sweat off of his brow and leaned up against the wall of the castle, sipping water from his flask. He looked over and noticed our approaching, not far behind. She slowed her run to a jog and came to a stop beside the green-haired squire. He offered her the flask, which she gratefully accepted. Taking a swig, she grinned at the green-haired teen. I feel great. I could run another round. Isuku chuckled. Well, we don't want to overdo it. Plus, it's time for your class with your mom. Star groaned. Ugh, yeah, you're right. You want to come with? The green-haired teen was about to respond, but a voice called out his name. Isuku, would you please accompany me for a moment? He turned around and saw King Toffee standing behind them, arms behind his back, and his usual monotone expression on his face. Isuku stiffened. Of course, your majesty. I'll see you later, Star. The girl, who was also confused by the sudden need for her squire, shrugged her shoulders and made her way to library, where she was to study with her mother. Isuku silently walked beside the king of Mewni, glancing at him every few seconds, waiting on an explanation or some sort of clarification. Suddenly, Toffee spoke up. If you've something to say, please say it. Isuku blushed and stammered out a response. I was just wondering what you needed, sir. He spoke carefully, not wanting to incur the king's wrath. Toffee looked over to him, a bemused smirk on his face, and his brow raised. Well, if you must know, I simply wanted to sit down with you and play a game of chess. I know your routine, and I knew Star would have class at this time, so I knew you'd be free, and Star wouldn't have to attend. She's not a fan. The verdant teen nodded. Oh, yes, sir. I love a game of chess. The king nodded. Good. The two entered a room, which had several bookshelves lining the walls. In the middle of the room stood a large fireplace, and a table with 2 chairs sat in front of it. Toffee took a seat and motioned for Isuku to do the same. When Isuku sat down at the clearly expensive table, he noticed that the checkered pattern was embedded into the top of it. Welcome to my study, young squire. Not many have the privilege to join me here. Usually it's just diplomats and other country leaders. I enjoy a good game of chess and play often, so I had this table commissioned by some mages in the underworld. The pieces are magic. The king waved his hand over the table, and it came to life with many figures of soldiers. On Toffee's side, knights of Muni and soldiers lined the board, as well as many versions of both him and Queen Moon. His side of the board hosted a rally of men that looked more like mercenaries than soldiers, as well as a figure of him and Star as king and queen. Isuku blushed at the implications, but was interrupted by Toffee. How long have you been playing? The green-haired squire nervously wrung his hands together. Since I was very young. My father taught me, and I played with a few of the older knights, but not any of the other squires. He decided not to mention the fact that they wanted nothing to do with him, and avoided him like the plague, since they believed him to be cursed. Toffee nodded. Very well, You may make the first move." Isuku nodded and moved one of his pawns, and the game began. Toffee retaliated, and Isuku carefully studied the board. He knew that the king was renowned for his cunning, and if the boy wasn't careful, he'd have the floor wiped with his green mop of a head before he could see it coming. So he decided to play a defensive game, opting to save his pieces rather than go after Toffee's. In the midst of their game, Toffee spoke up. "Isuku, do you believe that monsters and humans can live in harmony?" The question caught him off guard, but he made his move and responded. "Well, of course." Toffee nodded, seemingly satisfied, but Isuku continued. But there are those that aren't going to agree and never agree with what you're trying to do." The king paused and made his move. "You believe so?" He nodded and studied the board for a second. "Well, it's like those other Septarians and the Mewmans that still have anti-monster beliefs, even within castle quarters." He made his move, and Toffee scratched his chin. "I see. And Isuku, let's say that you had a close friend or relative, and they were murdered by a band of monsters. Wouldn't that be a deserving reason to be wary?" Isuku furrowed his brow, not in a good position in the game. I suppose. But isn't it good to be wary of everyone? Anyone has the potential to be dangerous, not just monsters." Toffee nodded. Yes, of course. But wouldn't it feel nice to ostracize and ridicule a monster to put off your pain on someone else, rather than hold it all on your shoulders? The green-haired teen frowned. "I don't believe that anyone deserves to be cast out because of something they have no control over." He moved his knight and took out the king's rook. The Septarian clicked his claws together, nodding. He moved his bishop. Check. Isuku stared at the board, realizing that he had put himself in a very compromising position. He frowned for a moment before taking out the bishop with his rook. Toffee rose his brow and moved his second rook into position. Check. There was only one move the green-haired teen could make, and he knew he'd immediately be in checkmate afterwards. He internally cursed and preformed the action, and was swiftly beaten by the king. Checkmate. Isuku bowed in respect. "Good game, your majesty." The Septarian nodded. "Yes, a good game indeed. You got a good head on your shoulders, and I'd like to pick your brain more, boy. So, why don't we make this a regular thing? We'll play a game of chess and discuss some things that I think about." The teen nodded. "Of course, your majesty. That would be incredible." The king gave a crooked smile before waving Isuku off. Yes. Well then, it's decided. Tomorrow, when Star meets for her class, come here. I'll be waiting. Go on now. Star should be finished studying now." The boy bowed once more, thanking the king for his time, and swiftly left the study. Toffee looked back over to the board, looking at the small version of Isuku, nervously surrounded by several of his troops. The game had been much closer than he had expected, and closer than any game he had had in a while. He stood up, deactivating the table and stretching. Isuku would make a fine king one day, he decided. He stepped out his study and looked at the servant girl that was walking fast. He stopped her. "Yes, king." "Toffee?" He lowered down and whispered to her. "The new servant girl, I believe she said her name was Felicia. Tell her to come to my private quarters on the upper levels." The servant looked at him, confused, before nodded. "Of course, King Toffee." The girl hurried away, and Toffee made his way to his quarters. It was time to see if his hunch was correct. Taftor dusted the main living area in the castle silently, thinking on her next move. Her father had said that he had a plan, but he seemed to not be making her privy on it. Instead, just telling her to bide her time and wait for his instructions. It was driving her mad, though. She had to wear this dumb suit all the time, and on top of that, she was basically sitting around and doing nothing. She messes up twice, and now suddenly she can't be trusted? She huffed, dusting a little more violently than she had been before. As she dusted, she accidentally knocked over a vase, and it shattered onto the floor. She cursed to herself and went to start cleaning up the mess when another servant tapped her on the shoulder. She spun around and began to speak before she noticed the servant's strange expression. Don't worry about that. Felicia, I'll clean it up. King Toffee requires your presence in his personal quarters." Taftor stood up, a strange look on her face. What for? The servant shrugged, blushing. I'm not sure, but it's best not to keep him waiting. The servant shoved the incognito Septarian out of the room and shut the door behind her. Taftor stood stiff in confusion before shaking out of her stupor. Toffee? What does he want? She walked for a moment before beginning to get nervous. What if I've been found out? Surely not. We've hardly had any interaction at all. There's no way he would have figured it out already. Her thoughts were interrupted when she arrived at the king's private quarters. She gulped and entered the room. When the doors opened, she saw King Toffee sitting near his fireplace, legs crossed, and reading a book. The noise caused him to look up, and he set his book down on the small coffee table in front of him. "Ah, Miss Felicia, I was expecting you. Please take a seat." He motioned to the other seat that was positioned directly in front of him. As she took her seat, he rose and began to pace around the room. He shut the door. "I'm sure you're wondering why you're here." He closed the curtains in the corner of the room, making it dark, save for the warm light coming from the fireplace. She gulped. "Ah, yes, sire. I came as quickly as I could, as to not keep you waiting, though." She gave a wavering smile, and Toffee sat back down in front of her. He crossed his legs and folded his hands over his lap, leaning into the plush material. "Yes, quite. As for why I've called you here, I was curious about your arrival here." Taftor knew she was sweating under her suit, but she wasn't going to give herself away that easily. "Ah, I just applied like everyone else. My mother was a servant once, and my sister too. Not here, though." The king stared at her. "Is that so? Please do tell." She gulped a little. My mother was a servant in the service of the butterflies several years ago, but she retired early to take care of my sister and I. My sister, Flora, was in service to the Johansons in the north for a while, but she was killed not long after in a bandit raid." Toffee nodded. "I see. A very touching tale indeed. I'm sorry for the loss of your sister. What was your mother's name?" Taftor was itching to jump up and get out, but she needed to play the part of servant girl. "Her name was Kalima." The king was silent for a moment before he unfolded his hands and leaned forward. "Take it off." The girl blushed. "Excuse me?" Toffee stared at her, his glare cold. "Take off the suit. I know exactly who you are, Taftor." She froze before returning the glare. "What are you going to do? Kill me? Send me back to my old man? Hold me hostage?" He frowned. "Take off the suit and let me look you in the eyes." She growled and came out of the suit, her jeweled eyes shining in the light of the fire and the dull metal of her prosthetic arm glinting dully. Toffee looked at the prosthetic in mild surprise. "I see you've had a mishap. Someone burn your arm off?" She smirked and scoffed. "Actually, that boy that guards that abomination of a daughter of yours gave this to me." Toffee chuckled. "I see. They failed to report that to me as well. But I suppose it matters not. I'm sure your father was delighted to see that you had failed, and to a squire no less." She growled. "He wasn't pleased. I intended not to fail him again, but it seems that your craftiness is not to be underestimated." The king laughed. "It wasn't hard to figure it out once I noticed that there wasn't a single application in the files, especially since I know for a fact that every file gets brought directly from the applications office to me." Taftor growled, her anger mounting. "My father instructed me to wait for his instruction and to provide information, but I think I'd rather kill you myself." Toffee rose his brow. "Oh, you don't know your father's plan, then?" She stepped forward, drawing a wicked-looking dagger from the sheath strapped to her leg. The king didn't move. "I wouldn't recommend that." She stared forward. "Give me one good reason that I shouldn't kill you right now." He held his hands behind his back. "Other than the fact that you couldn't? Perhaps the fact that you'd be hunted down and killed almost immediately after my death. And I'm sure your father wouldn't be pleased either." She took another step. "None of that matters. My father is going to kill me anyway, now that my cover has been blown. I'd rather die with a blade in my hand than running away like a coward or rotting in some kind of dungeon of yours." Toffee sighed. "Very well, then. Give it your best shot, then." She surged forward, and Toffee immediately counterattacked with a sword he pulled from seemingly nowhere. He severed her prosthetic clean in half, effectively disarming her. He touched the blade to the fire, and it ignited, and he held it at her neck. Taftor froze, still trying to process the last few events. She looked at the king, who had an amused, yet dangerous look in his eyes. Now you have two choices. You either serve me in my court as a spy against your father, or I'll lock you away in a dungeon to rot for the rest of your natural-born life. Which, may I add, is a very long time for Septarians. Taftor growled and sat back down in the chair. What do you want? Toffee smiled deviously. That's what I was hoping you'd choose. Star stretched and groaned. She had sat in that library for entirely too long just then. At least her class had ended relatively early today. She turned the corner and spotted the familiar green hair of her squire and friend. Oh hey, Isuku. The boy looked up and smiled at the sight of her. Princess Star. Hello. She jogged up to him, grinning. What's up? What did Dad want? He just wanted a game of chess, he said, and I was actually coming to get you. You actually got out kind of early, didn't you? She nodded. Mom had to go interview a couple of guys applying for court wizard in the castle. A bunch of politics and stuff. Boring. Let's go do something. Isuku was taken aback at the sudden shift, but only smirked. What do you have in mind? She tapped her chin. We could play a game. Come on, I have this awesome board game up in my room. Let's go. Isuku was grabbed and pulled away by Star. He chuckled to himself. If things could stay the same as they were right now, they may be all right. If only. Izuku's sword made a loud clanging against his target. He followed through with the attack, lighting his sword as he did so. He grinned at the technique, which was something new he had been working on. He heard applause from behind him. Woo! Yeah, go Isuku. The mop head grinned to the Septarian princess, whose tail wagged happily as she smiled. Isuku let his sword rest on his shoulder. So, what have you been working on? The two of them had been showcasing a secret technique or new idea every week for a couple of weeks, since their sparring match in the woods turned into a kidnapping. Star grinned, twirling her wand around. Well, I've actually been working on using my tail to attack. Izuku's eyebrows rose in curiosity. Oh, and how so? She grinned. Let me see his sword. Obliging, Isuku handed her one of the swords that were sitting on a nearby rack, and she wrapped her tail around its hilt, effectively holding onto it. Isuku grinned. Okay then, but how good are you with it? The girl's cheeks darkened. Well, actually, it took a while just to get the coordination down for grabbing things with it. You'd be surprised, despite having this huge tail, I've never really used it like this. The green net chuckled. I hear you. I hear you. Well then, why don't we do a little practicing? Star grew visibly excited, her tail making a slight wag, which made the sword wave around. Izuku grinned and got into a sparring position, holding his sword out in front of him. Star squared off in front of him similarly, holding her tail in front of her, and they began to lightly spar. A low growl emitted from Taftor's throat, watching the two spar from the inside of the courtyard. Toffee insisted that she still wear the Mewni suit, probably just to spite her. That abomination princess and her fiery little boy toy played around out there, while she was stuck working for the enemy. There had to be a way to get out of this place. Maybe she could go into hiding and wait out the war. Maybe she could skip dimensions. Maybe she could even try to go back to her father. She sighed in frustration, throwing the duster she had onto the floor. She was kidding herself. She knew better than that. She'd probably end up killed no matter what she did. So for now, she'd cooperate with the traitor. Felicia, a word. She looked over and saw Toffee and rolled her eyes at the use of the fake name. Man, she really just wanted to rip his head off. She followed him into his study, and he sat down beside his fireplace, calmly poking at the fire. Anything from your father? Taftor frowned. Not really. I told him that things were going smoothly, and that I wasn't being suspected. He did mention something about going ahead with Phase 2 of the plan. However, I still am not being made privy to that information. Toffee nodded. Very well then. Even if it isn't much, it's valuable information to me. If Rastakor is becoming more comfortable with moving forward with his plan, he may slip up. Keep reporting to him. Then, report any findings back to me immediately. That'll be all I need, Taftor. The Septarian girl stood in silence for a moment before speaking up. He doesn't trust me. Toffee didn't spare her a look. I'm well aware of that. Her frown deepened. I think he may have sent me here because he planned to kill me from the start. The king stopped prodding the fire for a moment. What makes you say that? Taftor clenched her fists, squeezing hard. I know he despises me. I've known the whole time that I've been a disappointment. I think that he planned to send me here with the expectation of my failure. That he knew that I'd screw it up, and he'd have an excuse to kill me without remorse. Not that he would anyway. Toffee frowned. Taftor, if you truly believe what you say, then I truly am sorry for the lot that life dealt you. Rastakor used to be a reasonable man. A very dear friend to me, in fact. However, I fear that my leaving of the kingdom to marry into Mewni may have angered him to a point of no return. The young Septarian simply looked at the ground. Toffee arose from his spot. I'm not the kind of man to hold a grudge, youngling. So know well, as long as you don't cross me or my family again, I have no reason not to give you a chance. He exited the room, and Taftor stood in silence. A single tear fell, shining from the light from the fire. Star and Isuku finished sparring, and Isuku grinned, sheathing his sword at his side. Star set hers back down on the rack and offered Isuku a high five, which he gladly accepted. Good work, Star. I got to say, you've definitely got a knack for using that tail of yours. The princess blushed. I get it from my father. The two shared a laugh. Isuku grinned at Star through the laughter. Hey, isn't it about time for your lesson? Star shook her head. Mom gave me the day off because she has to show the newest court wizards their duties. Or she just wanted to. Either way, Isuku nodded. I see then. Well, I don't have anything particular to do today. You have any ideas? The Septarian girl tapped her chin in thought for a moment before snapping her fingers. I think I've got a great idea. Why don't we go into town? We haven't done that in a while. Isuku grinned. That's a great idea. I could even introduce you formally to my parents. It's been a while since I visited. The two grinned, and Star nodded. Great then. I have to go get something out of my room. Isuku nodded. I'll go do the same. Get some supplies and all. Star giggled. I was just going to shower and put on a cute little dress, but I know what you mean. The green-haired teen blushed a bit at the thought and chuckled. Oh, okay then. Meet me here when you're done. Star grinned. Okay. She yelled out to him as she ran in the opposite direction. However, as she was running back into the castle, she didn't see the pink-haired figure that she was about to run into. Watch it. Star came to a screeching halt and looked at the person ahead of her. Oh hey, you're that new servant girl, right? Felicia? Taftor could feel a headache coming on. Yes, that's my name. Sorry for my rudeness, princess, but I really didn't want you barreling into me. Star chuckled. Don't worry about it. Hey, why don't you walk with me to my room? The girl went to open her mouth in protest, but she realized that she needed to kill some time anyway. Plus, how bad could walking with the abomination be? What the hell? She thought to herself. Very well, then princess. Lead the way. Star did so happily, skipping almost every step. After a few moments of silence, Star turned to face the girl and grinned. Sue, any boys you like? Taftor almost puked. Ah, no princess. That's not exactly a concern of mine. The Septarian princess nodded. Okay. There were a few more moments of silence before Star decided to speak up again. Well, what if I told you there was a boy I know that really likes you? Taftor snorted. I'd call you a crock of trash. She mused. I'd have to say that I disagree. You couldn't possibly mean that Squire boy of yours? Star nodded. Yeah, his name is Isuku. The incognito maid simply rolled her eyes and scoffed. Yeah, like I'd ever go for them. To know princess, I think he might be more likely to have a thing for royalty. Really not wanting to give herself away to more people than she had to. Taftor gave the princess a sickly sweet-looking smile. Star's eyes widened, and a blush took over her face. No way. He's my squire. That would be totally inappropriate. The pretend maid simply shrugged her shoulders. I'm just saying, princess, that's probably more likely than what you're saying. The two walked in silence for the rest of the journey to Star's room. There, they split, Felicia going to continue her maid duties. Star immediately went into her closet and began sifting through her clothes, looking for a specific outfit. She grabbed it, pulling it off the hanger in the process, and held it up to herself in the mirror. It was a short dress, similar to the one that she normally wore, except it was a crimson red in color with white frills and a silhouette of a white butterfly on the chest. She quickly put it on, along with her tall boots, and her headband that had horns on it. She smiled at herself in the mirror one more time, before sprinting out of her room, and towards the place where she and Isuku decided to meet before going into town. However, before she could turn the corner good, she ran directly into someone, knocking both her and whoever she hit over. Oof, man, I'm just running into everyone today. The person she hit spoke up. Well, young princess, that wouldn't be the case if you'd pay attention to where you were running. She looked up and noticed that the man she hit was wearing a set of dark blue robes, as well as a hood that covered his head, recognizing the outfit as one of which the royal mages would wear. She titled her head, "A royal mage? Has my mother already finished touring all of you?" The man shook his head, a light blush dusting his cheeks. Well, I'm actually quite lost, and I don't know where the meeting place is. You wouldn't happen to know, would you? Star thought for a moment, and then shrugged. I don't think Mom said anything to me about it, but I think the library would be as good a place as any to check. The man nodded. That sounds like a wonderful idea. Thank you for your time, princess. Oh, and do watch where you're going from now on. The man gave her a warm smile and lifted himself off the stone floor, dusting off his robes as he did so. Star pointed him in the direction of the library, and he was on his way. Star shrugged the encounter off and headed down to the courtyard. Isuku adjusted his sword on his side, tapping the hilt as he waited for Star. He had a knapsack thrown over his shoulder, carrying a few essentials just in case. He heard footsteps rapidly approaching, and he turned around to see the Septarian girl come to a screeching halt in front of him. He took a step back in surprise. Whoa, someone is in a hurry. The girl grinned. Well, it's been a little while since I've been into town. Plus, I want to meet your parents. The green-haired Squire chuckled. Oh yeah, I forgot about that. Well, I say we do our exploring first, and then we see my parents. Make it sort of a last stop of the day. Star nodded. Totally. Oh, and we can bring them some cool stuff? Izuka nodded and smiled. Absolutely. I bet they'd love that. The princess returned the smile, and they began their journey to the city. Taftor sighed in relief when she finally separated from the princess. She had significantly more energy than what she wanted to deal with. She snickered when she thought about how the girl would react had she known who she was. Probably wouldn't be as excitable then. She silently dusted the books in the library. Toffee still had her act as a maid, despite her completely blowing her cover and working as his double agent. It was annoying for sure, but she understood. Didn't want to appear even more suspicious. Like it hardly mattered. She was interrupted from her dusting when the door to the library opened, and a robed man walked in through the front door. Getting a good look at him, she noted his sharp eyes. He surveyed the room quickly, and when he noticed her, he smiled. Well, hello there. You wouldn't have happened to have seen the Queen and other mage candidates recently, have you? She frowned, shaking her head. I don't believe that they've been here yet. I suppose you could stay and wait on them. The man frowned slightly, nodding. Very well then. I just can't seem to find them. I was a little late today, so I'm a bit lost. He gave a sheepish smile, and Taftor resisted the urge to roll her eyes. Instead, she offered her own smile. Yes, well, please do be careful. I've cleaned a lot of this area. He nodded. Of course. She heard him mumble about how nice everyone was here when he walked away, leaving her alone with her thoughts once again. She sighed. Falling into a routine like this probably wasn't a good thing. Maybe she needed to make some friends or something. She scoffed immediately. Unlikely. As soon as he turned away from the maid, the mage smirked too. Himself. Honestly, that girl, though she was fooling anyone, he was positive that Toffee had already discovered her. He tapped a symbol that was emblazoned on the inside of his robe. Rastakor, I found your daughter. I don't know for sure yet, but I'm positive that with the shoddy job of hiding she's doing, she's already been discovered. A voice echoed back to him, in his head. Elaborate malus. He chuckled. Well, for one, she seems to be doing all her chores alone. Also, she's dusting the books in the royal library. There was a moment of silence before Rastakor sighed. The girl was never the smartest. No matter if Toffee's got her discovered, then we can't kill her just yet. It would raise too much suspicion. I figured that this much would happen, and I was never going to let her privy to the plan. But she's too much of a liability to keep around. Continue your assignment. Get close to the king. We'll begin the next phase. Malus grinned. Of course, sir. The connection link was terminated, and Malus stood in the shadows of the castle library. A few voices echoed out, and he recognized Queen Moon's as one of them. And here, we have the castle library. There should be everything you need for your duties in here. He rounded the corner and put his smile back on. Queen Moon. Hello. My apologies for being so late to the tour. I was running late, and I got lost. I came here so that I may meet the group. The woman gave him a scrutinizing gaze before nodding her head. You must be Benevious, then. Very well. Join the group. And it would do you well not to be late again. You don't want to be released from your duties, after all. He gave a sheepish smile, lowering his head a bit. Ah, yes, of course. I'll remember that, my lady. She continued to tour, and Malus chuckled in his head. It's almost too easy. Ooh, Zuka, look at that. The young squire sighed in exasperation. He was already carrying a few bags full of things, and the princess continued to be relentless in her shopping spree. Ah, princess, maybe we should stop for the day? I mean, it is getting awfully late. Awfully late was a bit of stretch, but Isuku still wanted to go by his parents and at least say hello. Star stopped, turning to Isuku with a frown. Ah, all right. I guess we do still have to go by your parents' place. The green net chuckled. Yeah, well, at least it's pretty close by here. The half-Septarian walked beside her squire. You know, if they lived so close this whole time, why didn't you come visit them before? He chuckled. Ah, Star, we're actually a couple miles from the castle. True, I suppose I could have before, but I guess I've just been too busy. The princess's eyes widened. Wow, we're really that far? Man, I guess I got a little carried away. Izuku looked at the bundles of things he was carrying and chuckled. Yeah, you could say that. They walked for a few minutes before Izuku turned to a small little house, similar to the ones that surrounded it. Well, we're here. Star pumped her fist in the air. Woo, let's go. Before the young squire could utter another word, Star blasted forward and barged into the house. Hello, Izuku's parents. The short brown-haired woman that was in the kitchen area when the door slammed open dropped her spoon. Ah, Joshua, you may want to come in here. There was a moment of silence before a grumbling man could be heard coming from the other room. You know, I just got back, and I always. He stopped talking immediately when he saw the young princess standing in front of him, his door almost off its hinges, and his teenage son walking in with bags of goods, a sheepish grin on his face. Hey guys, I decided today was a good day to visit. After apologies were handed out and introductions were given out, Izuku's mother smiled warmly at the two. Well, good thing I hadn't quite started dinner yet. Now I can cook for both of you. Izuku smiled. Oh, Mom, we can eat at the castle after we get back. You don't have. The woman threateningly held her spoon at her son's neck. Now, Izuku, I am cooking for my son and the Princess of Mewni when they are guests in my house. And you're not telling me otherwise. His father sat at the table with his feet propped up and his hands behind his head. Best to listen to your mother, boy. The spoon was thrown at his head almost immediately. Get your feet off of my table, you old man. Izuku's father rubbed his head and sent the woman a weak glare. Fine, fine then. Star giggled at the exchange, and Izuku let out a sigh, sinking into his chair. It had been a while since he ate dinner like this. His mother spoke to Star from the kitchen. Princess, do you like corn pork stew? The girl's eyes sparkled. Oh, absolutely. I love food in general, but that's one of my favorites. The woman smiled. Well, that's a coincidence. That's Izuku's favorite as well. It was a good coincidence, too, that you two decided to come visit tonight. The man snickered and turned to his son. She's been cooking your favorites ever since you left. Don't know if she's been hopeful you'd come back, or if she just misses you that much. Another spoon came out of nowhere and hit the man upside the head again, this time sending him to the floor. Izuku looked up in surprise, seeing his mom smile innocently and sit down. Let's simmer for just a moment, and it'll be ready. Princess, why don't you tell me a bit of what you and Izuku have been doing, now that he's your squire and all? Star smiled. Oh, that's a great idea. So, on his first day, we were attacked by this Septarian girl trying to steal my wand, and Star went on to chronicle the past few weeks that he had been her squire, and Izuku progressively watched his mother get paler and paler. He also shrunk in his chair, worried from the response he would get from her. After they were kidnapped, his mother held her hand up. "I can't hear any more without passing out. Also, dinner's ready." She set the table, and his father finally came to, although he was still a bit disorientated from the attack. "Ooh, corn pork stew. My favorite." They chuckled at him, and his mother smiled warmly. "Well, are there any less dangerous things you do?" Isuku chuckled. "Well, other than training and hanging out, I have a handful of official duties, and I also periodically play chess with the king while Star attends lessons." At that, Izuku's mother's eyes widened in surprise. "Chess with the king? Oh goodness, Isuku, that's very neat." The boy blushed. "Well, it's fun. King Toffee is the best I've seen." His father nodded. "That man is known for his cunning after all." Izuku nodded in confirmation. "I'm going to beat him one day. Though, I just know it." They all smiled, and Star sighed in content. "Miss Izuku's mom, that was amazing. Maybe I should get the castle to let you come cook for us." The woman's face turned bright red. "Oh goodness, I could never. I would be so nervous. Plus, I'm quite content being a housewife." Mr. Zelina nodded. "Good thing too, 'cause I can't cook worth a penny." Izuku chuckled, and went a bit pale at the mention of his father's cooking. It had been years since it happened, but the boy would never forget the trauma. "Yes, you'd be pretty lost without me." They shared a laugh, and made small talk as they finished up, and Mrs. Zelina tidied the kitchen up. Afterwards, Izuku and Star bid his parents farewell, his mother trying to hold on to him and not let him go. His father had to pry her off of him and ordered him to run. Once they got a good distance away, they slowed down to a more even pace. Star walked with her arms behind her head, looking up at the sky. You know, that was a very enriching experience. The young brunette looked over to her. "What do you mean?" She shrugged. "Well, it's just interesting is all. How even though there's a huge difference in the lives of our parents, they're super similar." Izuku chuckled. "Maybe all parents are just like that?" Star shrugged. "I don't know. Makes sense to me, though." They shared a laugh, and Izuku sighed. "Well, maybe it's not a coincidence. Maybe it's the reason we met at all." The Septarian princess simply shrugged again. "Maybe." They walked the rest of the way back to the castle in thoughtful silence. Izuku thought of the events that lead to him being Star Squire. Had not one of those highly specific events, it's likely that he'd be alone still, no doubt having to be ridiculed by the other squires all the time. But being with the princess, he was never actually around any other knights or squires. He felt liberated, and Star was an amazing friend as well, something he never really had before. He sighed and smiled, which Star noticed, her own smile growing. When they reached the castle, Star bid Izuku a good night and went directly to her room. Izuku went to his as well, strolling silently through the torch-lit halls. On the way to his room, he noticed a broom that had fallen onto the floor. He frowned at it. One of the maids must have left it or dropped it. "Guess I'll put it back." He picked it up and strolled to where he knew the cleaning supplies closet was. He opened it up and stared in surprise in front of him. Taftor had just finished the nightly report to her father when the supply closet door swung open, revealing that mop-top Squire that was always with the princess. She must have looked stupid if his own reaction was anything to gauge off of. "What are you doing in here?" So this was the end of this series. Stay tuned for next part of this series, and if you like this video, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Until next time.